Hi, everyone.
Hola.
Some of you may already know me. You've received many of my emails so far, and you may even recognize me from a school visit. But my name is Anna Hughes, and I'm an Assistant Director of Admissions at SYA. I'm also the China Country Manager this year, and I'm also an SYA Spain alumna. So thank you so much for joining us tonight for the SYA China Google Hangout. I'm excited to be here. I hope you are too. I have some very special guests joining me tonight. Carly, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Again, thank you so much for joining us tonight for the SYA China Google Hangout with our alums. My name is Carly, and I'm the Assistant Marketing Manager here at SYA. So first of all, congratulations to everybody watching tonight. You must be so excited. A little bit about the format tonight. We're going to go ahead and ask our alums some questions, and then we'll open up the floor to you guys at home. So feel free to put your name, school, what state you're from in the chat box. We can all get to know each other a little bit. And of course, feel free to put your questions in there as well. I'm going to put some directions in there on how to actively participate in the chat. So I'll put that up in 1 second for you. But yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Carly. And joining us remotely are 3 very special guests, Sophia, Tariq, and Owen. Do you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourself? We'll start with you, Sophia.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sophia. I'm a senior at Murray School in Washington, D.C.
Great. Tariq, you want to go ahead?
Hi, I'm Tariq. I'm a senior at Mobile School, and I'll be going to Case Western Reserve University next year.
Awesome. And last but not least.
And I'm Owen from Boston, Massachusetts, and I go to Belmont Hill School, and I'll be going to Bates College in the fall.
Great. Thank you, guys. And before we begin, I want to let you know, so we've been fortunate enough to be hit with a late winter blizzard. So we have been kind of experiencing power outages throughout the day. I don't expect anything to happen, but just kind of bear with us if there are any technological glitches. And if we do lose power, we'll boot up really quickly. Worst case scenario, we'll reschedule, but I think we'll be all set. I think it's winding down at this point. So yeah, thank you. So to start, do you guys want to tell us a little bit about how you felt when you were accepted to SYA and ultimately what made you decide to attend? And we can start with you, Sophia, again, if you want.
Okay. I mean, I was super excited. It was a snow day, just like today, actually. Yeah, and so I thought I was like going to be in school and I wouldn't think about it all day, but instead I was like at home, nervous the entire day, waiting for like the 2 p.m. decision time. But I was so excited when I got in, and I think it was a combination of like talking to my school and making sure that I wouldn't miss too much, you know, college counseling wise, and just sort of getting the go ahead from them. Parents getting on board. I was already pretty sure I really wanted to go. But just sort of working out the logistics was sort of the final step in like deciding to actually go.
Tariq, what about you?
Very similar to Sophia's. It was mainly just figuring out the logistics of, you know, what classes I would miss, what classes I would have to, you know, sort of take my senior year. I mean, applying, I really wanted to go. I knew if I got in, I would definitely be going because I already got the okay from my school. But sort of just figuring out the logistics and seeing that my schedule wouldn't be too difficult. Plus, you know, senior year schedule is not easy. And plus the extra classes graduate, sort of figuring that stuff out. And then once we figured that out, I was sort of like definitely going to go. So sort of the logistics things, figuring that out. And then once I figured that out, I was ready to go.
Cool. And Owen, you?
Yeah, so I applied a little bit later than the average applicant. So I don't really remember having a set time that I'd find out, but I do remember like getting the email and being pretty excited. I think my parents were a little nervous at first, especially my mom, but then we gradually kind of came into accepting the idea of me going to China for a year, and they were on board and very excited too.
Awesome. So when you got to Beijing, what were your first couple of days like? What was your first impression of the school, of the city, of your classmates?
I think the first time we met as a class was in Logan Airport in like this big room. I was definitely really nervous. I mean, it was like a lot of people that I'd never met before and that I knew I was going to be with for like 9 months in China. Sort of was pretty significant. And everyone was really nice that first day. I could tell that everyone was as nervous as I was, which made me feel a lot better. And I think the plane ride is a bit of a blur, honestly. But when we got there, we were all on this big bus, like coming into the city. And I think that's like when I was the most nervous, like the entire year, because we were about to meet our host parents. And I was like, you know, are we going to get along? Like, what's going to happen? And we got off the bus, and my host mother found me right away. She like went right for me. I don't know how she recognized me so quickly. She like grabbed my arm. She was like, said something in Chinese that I didn't understand. So it actually went pretty well, I'd say. And I think the thing I remember the most is that we got there the first night, and I thought I knew some Chinese and I'd be fine. And she was like, hey, do you want to eat food? And I was like, no, we ate on the airplane. We're fine, all in Chinese. And then 10 minutes later, like she brought me like 4 baozi that were like probably told her I was actually hungry in the end. So I think it was just like a moment of realizing that like I actually didn't know as much as I thought I did, but that we were going to like, you know, we were going to work it out and it was all going to be okay together. It was pretty good.
Yeah, my experience was very similar in the sense that I had taken 2 years of Chinese prior to going to Beijing, and I thought I knew Chinese until I stepped foot to China, and the language was taken to a whole nother level. I remember the first time meeting with everyone, I didn't meet in the little room that they were in, but I met at the gate because I was commuting from New York City up into Boston. So I was a little late, but I met everyone at the gate before we got to Beijing. And I remember we got there, and it was about 7 o'clock in Beijing when we landed. And I remember standing there waiting for my host dad, and I was really nervous because I thought I knew Chinese. And then he talked to me, and I didn't understand a word he was saying. Sort of like realization that I was in China sort of hit me at that moment. And although, you know, it was that language barrier, going to China was my first time out of the country. And so I was amazed at what I saw. And so I was like really in awe of everything around me. And I live near one of the sort of city gates called Deshengmen. So like passing that at nighttime, it was really pretty. And I'd never seen anything like it before. So having that sort of living in the area did sort of helped with my adjustment. But, you know, that first couple days where, you know, you really can't understand what anyone is saying it's really scary. But, you know, you really get used to it really quickly.
Yeah, we kind of had the same experience. Like, was very nervous on the bus, and I know we got pictures of our host families, and our host families got pictures of us. And when we kind of stopped in front of the school, I was sitting with one of my friends from my home school who was also going to SYA China. And I was like, oh, shoot, there's my host mom. I was so nervous. I didn't know if I should go to her first or if I should get my bag. And she kind of caught me and said, like, oh, it's so nice to meet you finally. And I had taken Chinese before, so I kind of knew what she said, but I just stood there and I had no idea how to respond. And that's when I knew. I was like, my Chinese is not as good as I thought it was. There's a lot of work to do. But that night and that first week, I think that was like one of the best weeks because we had an orientation where we just went on we went on scavenger hunts. We had weekends that were only supposed to be with our host families, which really helped getting to know them and practice your Chinese. And then going to restaurants and little excursions with your advisor groups were really helpful. And so it was a pretty memorable first week, actually. It was really, really fun.
That's great. I remember when I first arrived, so I did SYA Spain, so a little bit different, but my friends presented me this photo album and they wrote in Spanish on the front. And so I gave it to my host mom, and it was written incorrectly. So my host mom was trying to erase everything that they wrote. But it was really cute, and it was just kind of a great start to our relationship and something I'll never forget. And so for those of you who are just joining us now, I want to remind you to put your questions in the chat box and feel free to introduce yourself, your school, the state you live in. It's a good time to start getting to know each other. And obviously host families are an important part of the experience. So do you guys want to talk to me a little bit about your host family life? Do you have a favorite memory you want to share? I know people, I think the host family is always what people most want to hear about. So.
I think my host family situation was like pretty unique. It was just me and my host mother, and she was 70 years old. She retired. She had two daughters in their 40s who both lived in Beijing but not in the house with us. So the house, like the everyday life, was just me and her. And when I heard it was just going to be me and her, I was sort of unsure at first. You know, like just one other person. If we didn't get along, it would have been pretty awkward. But I was her seventh host student, and I think it really showed in that. She was so patient with me, and she had the time to like really try to talk to me. And we would sit after dinner every night. I mean, some nights we sat there for like just talking. I mean, not towards the beginning because the language barrier was sort of there, but I mean, towards like November, December, even we would just talk about everything. It was just really cool because she was just so interesting and she carried so much Chinese history with her. I mean, she was a teenager during the Cultural Revolution. Yeah, like she's incredible. She's one of the coolest people I think I've ever met. I just have so much respect for her, and she also cooks really well, which is a huge bonus. She made like amazing Chinese food. But I think my favorite memories of being with her are just the nights that we would, she'd make dinner. She refused to let me help with dinner. She'd teach me if I wanted to learn, but like I was never allowed to do anything practical around the house. But we would just sit there after dinner and we would talk. Like I explained like American politics and the upcoming election to her, and she explained to me like how different it was from when she was younger, and like how the politics were like not at all the same, and like I could vote when I got back, and she never voted. So I think my favorite memories were just talking with her.
That's great. Tariq, what do you think? What was one of your favorite memories of your host family?
One of my favorite memories that I probably will never forget is when my host family took me to my host cousin's wedding. And walking in, and I remember walking into a room full of Chinese people and being the only foreigner in the room. And as soon as I walked in, everyone sort of turned their heads, looked at me. It was like, why is this foreigner here at this moment? Like, why, what is he doing here? And, sort of people were looking at me strange and giving me that look of like, why are you here? And as I began to sort of talk to my host parents and sort of work around the room, people discovered that I sort of learned Chinese, and my host parents were telling everyone in the room that I knew Chinese and I could speak with them. And as soon as people heard that, people were like running up to me, wanting to talk to me, asking me where I was from. They wanted to know, where I lived. They basically wanted to know my life story and wanted to tell me theirs. And it was so interesting because, I would, talk to my long, like distant, like host uncle that flew in from, I think he was from Chengdu, learn, the family stories, to know you as well. And, I remember standing up and taking a picture with my host family. And then somehow during the wedding, they wanted me to get involved in the wedding. So they gave me a bushel of flowers and they just said, throw it up as the bride walks past. And I was like, okay, I guess I can, that's simple enough. I guess I can do that. So somehow in the end, I got involved in the wedding, which was probably, I think, a unique experience that I don't think you can get without having a host family. And so, yeah, that was my host family. I love my host family. They were just like my parents back in the United States. It was really nice living with them.
Wonderful. Oh, and what about you?
Yeah, so my host family was fantastic. At first, I thought it would just be like one long awkward sleepover, and I thought and the first night it kind of was. I remember waking up and I was kind of jet lagged, and I woke up super early and I didn't know what the proper time to leave my bedroom and like come out for breakfast. So I just remember sitting there just being like, what do I do? But they were fantastic. I remember one of my good friends, his host family lived in my building and was best friends with my host mom. And so that first week they would have us like hang out and do different trips a lot. which was fantastic, getting to know my host mother and his host mother, and then also each other. So I had a host mom, dad, and a brother, but the brother was kind of older and out of the house. But they were fantastic. We would talk all the time. I think one of my favorite memories was we had a party. They kind of hosted a party at this restaurant with all of my host dad's old friends. And my host mom was just kind of like showing me off like I was like a prize pony. And it was just, she would have me speak Chinese to them. I was taking photos with everyone. But at the same time, I was like a part of the group and the party. I wasn't just like the American student there. And so I felt, I guess, pretty Chinese, which was a good feeling. And I think that's where the host family like is like most important, and just like making you actually a part of the society and the culture. And they also help you learn Chinese just as much as classes do.
Absolutely. And I just kind of want to touch upon some of the logistical details, because I think one of the number one questions that I get is about host family placements. And I think when you ask any SYA alum, I truly think that the host family is the bread and butter of the experience, and usually the highlight. And we take great care to match students with the best families abroad. And like many of you said, our host families have been hosting for a while and genuinely enjoy opening their homes and their hearts to SYA students. And so early in the enrollment process, we send documents out called the Host Family Placement Questionnaire and a Parent's Memorandum. And so these forms give us more insight on you and an opportunity to comment on, you know, your living habits, your lifestyles, your dietary restrictions. And so these forms should be completed honestly and with a lot of details, because they help us make the placements. So these documents are given to our host family coordinator, who is in Beijing, and she uses them to place you essentially. And she's interviewed them, she's visited the houses, and so these forms, along with other elements of your applications, are used to best match you with the host family. And there's a little bit of like, I think, magic involved too. And it just like, sometimes like it works and they do a really good job. And yeah, I think it definitely is a highlight for many, many students. So, all right. So next up, do you guys want to talk about your classes at SYA China? Were they similar? Were they different than what you were taking at your homeschool? Did you have a favorite class?
I mean, I think the highlight of classes at SYA China is definitely the Chinese classes. I calculated at one point that 40% of the classes we took were Chinese classes. We had a first period class that we took 5 times a week, and then we had another Chinese class that we had 4 times a week, and then we had tutorial twice a week, which is like a smaller section class with like 3 or 4 students and a teacher. I mean, the Chinese classes are just, it was the first thing I fell in love with. I think at SYA China in the first like couple of weeks when I was still adjusting to like the other people and my host family. I just started to like love the Chinese classes. There's just sort of some magic where they're really fun, and you also can tell that you're learning a lot of Chinese. So those are just incredible. And I think, you know, I came to China loving Chinese, obviously. I mean, I really wanted to come for the language, but I think by the time I left, you know, Chinese is just some of my favorite things. I know I want to study it for the rest of my life. So I think, yeah, Chinese classes are definitely a highlight. But besides that, the other classes are also really good. I took environmental science, which was really interesting. We talked about, we did like an air pollution unit, and we talked about, you know, where a lot of kids might not be able to really understand air pollution. It was like, well, I remember last week when, you know, the air, you could tell it was like there's air pollution. Here's why there was air pollution. So it was really interesting to see some of those topics applied to the real world. And then Chinese history was also really interesting, again, especially and being able to talk to host parents about it. One thing that I always think is really funny and sort of demonstrates this about like a lot of these historical figures. One of them is Alumni, and my host mother says that she remembered him especially because she and her friends felt bad for him because they thought his wife was ugly, which is like something you wouldn't learn in any other history book. So I think a lot of the classes, like, you really see how they apply to your life as well as just being classes in general.
Cool. Tariq, are you still with us? I know the visual there's some issues, but can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, perfect. Well,
Okay. I
bear
think
with
we
us.
can hear him. We'll be okay.
Yeah. So what was your favorite class?
I'm gonna have to agree with Sophia. My favorite classes were the Chinese classes. Um, Sort of memory that I have when it came to classes was Chinese, and in particular one teacher, which her name was Ding Laoshi, and she was the she was the our sort of like main Chinese teacher, because you had sort of a main Chinese teacher, and then you had sort of like a second Chinese teacher for class. And I will always remember her because she always made the classes very interactive. And she always kept you involved in the class. And I think it was her who, I already had the passion, but she turned that passion into love, because if she saw you slacking off in class, or sort of you spacing out, she would call on you, particularly call on you and say, okay, what's the answer to this question? Just to sort of keep you engaged. And I know that teach you in those Chinese classes, you walk outside and you use it. I remember one of the lessons that I learned in one of my Chinese classes was about, ordering fast food or trying to give directions. And I walked out that day for lunch and I ordered food. Like, I used some of the vocab that I had just learned the night before and sort of reviewed in class that day. So you really begin to the Chinese classes, because one, it's sort of your lifeline to sort of, get around and sort of communicate. But then two, it's also very engaging. The teachers, they love teaching, they love the students, and then you sort of reciprocate that love, and you build a relationship with the teachers, and they really are still your teachers, but you develop a little bit more of a bond with them rather than just a teacher-student bond. Yeah.
That's great. Owen, what about you?
Yeah, so I came back to Beaumont Hill and I was like telling everyone that the Chinese teachers at SYA China were the best like teachers, like any teacher I've had in my life, in my entire life. And I think it's partially because when a lot of these teachers went to the college, it's just right across the street from the school, and what they did is they majored in like teaching Chinese to English speaking students. And I think that's part of the reason they're so great. And then also they were just like great people. Like, I miss Ding Laoshi so much. And each class had each level of Chinese had a main teacher. Tariq's was Ding Laoshi, but we also, Sophia and I were in the same class and we had her too. But I remember thinking how funny it was that Ding Laoshi had a Beijing accent, which is like really thick. And then our Chinese teacher, Sophia and me, she was from a different part of China, was like very soft spoken, and all of the Chinese kids in our class, or all the students in our class, would like speak very soft spoken and would have the same accent as her because we were learning with her all the time. And then all the Chinese 2 kids, they would speak like Ding Laoshi. But they were just like, it was the best experience, those Chinese classes. And then the other classes as well. I think my favorite would be the politics and economics elective that I took. I opted out of the environmental science and I took this. And out of all of the classes in my life, this is one of them that I just learned the most in. A very diverse course with a lot of different readings and a lot of different discussions that go on. And it just covered so much. And I'm using a lot of it now back in senior year, and I'm sure I'll use it in college, which was great.
That's great. So when you guys are not in school, you're able to participate in co-curriculars. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you or your friends participated in while you were in Beijing?
Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of extracurriculars actually. But I think the ones that I remember the most were I took 2 music classes every Wednesday. I took Erhu and Yangqin, which are really different. And I loved both classes, sort of for different reasons. The Yangqin class was really fun because we focused a lot on the music, and it was sort of a bit easier to pick up as a beginner. And so by the end of the year, we actually had made it through a decent amount of curriculum when we were playing songs that were much more advanced. I think it's like 2 strings. It's a very interesting instrument. But the thing is, unless you're good at it, it sort of sounds terrible. It sounds really bad. It's really screechy and so I think our first few classes were really rough for the entire school because everyone could hear us struggling to play notes. And our poor teacher was so patient with us. But she was so wonderful. I think the reason that we all loved the class was because we sort of became really good friends with her. We actually went out to get food with her a few times. She took us to some really cool Chinese places in the neighborhood. And we ended up taking her to a pie shop that we had been to. So we got really close with her. And I think my other favorite extracurricular was on Wednesdays, I taught English to Chinese senior citizens at this community center. And I think the reason I loved this so much was because they were also just incredibly patient. I mean, once I spent an hour and a half explaining the differences between a king size bed and a queen size bed versus a double and a single. And I thought that they'd be really bored after about 10 minutes, but the people I was with were so patient. They were really curious about why Americans have king size beds as well as doubles. And so we talked about that for a while. So those were my favorite of the Chinese extracurriculars. But my friends and I all started an ultimate frisbee team because we both played in the US, play pretty seriously actually, as seriously as you can play ultimate frisbee in the United States. And so we started a team there that met every week. And that was really fun because we had American students. We also had a few of the Chinese students from the school come out and play with us on some of the days, and they had never played frisbee before. And it was really fun to teach them about frisbee. Yeah, so those are the main extracurriculars I did in China.
That's really cool. Tariq, what about you?
So some of the co-curricular I did was SYA's Ultimate Frisbee Club. I was a member of that. I also did calligraphy. I also took music lessons, but I took the dizi, which is sort of the bamboo flute. I also think I might have hurt some people's ears while playing. I wanted to play, so I had sort of a one-on-one lesson with the teacher. So that was sort of my sort of in-school co-curriculars. But outside of school, I also did something very similar to SYA. But instead of teaching English to senior citizens, I just taught it to hotel employees. So right around the corner from Beijing is it's called Holiday Inn. And basically they work with our school and they send some students over to teach some of the employees English, especially the employees at front desk, and sort of accept patrons that are coming into the hotel. And sort of that's what I did every Wednesday. And sort of that was my main activity outside of school, was to teach English to those employees. What was really nice is that sometimes they feed you and then you exchange WeChat with some of the employees. And so you really get to know the employees. I remember invited me out to Hot Pot, and invited the other 2 students that I was working with out to Hot Pot, and sort of we met up and we had pot with them, and it was really, really fun. We didn't talk about English, we just talked about life, and sort of really, really got to know each other, which was really cool.
That's awesome. That sounds like a lot of fun. Owen, what about you?
Yeah, so I also do a lot of extracurriculars, especially at my home school, and that was one of the things that I was kind of worried about when I was coming here. Specifically, I play a lot of tennis here. However, when I got over there, I think one of the important things was that I found new extracurriculars that I liked just as much, if not more, than tennis. And so some of the ones that I involved myself in was I did it was watercolor painting class, so Chinese watercolor painting. It was taught by this 85-year-old man who was just the greatest guy. Everyone loved him. And so that was once a week. And then there was bilingual club, which I would go to sometimes. And then there was another opportunity that was created during our year, which was they would take college students from across the street and match them up with students at SYA. So we each had we call them kind of our BNU friends. And so you would either go to like a cafe or kind of do whatever activity you guys decided you wanted to do someday, and they would practice their English and you would practice your Chinese. And so that was kind of a fun way of meeting new people and working on your language skills. And then I also, by the spring, my friends and I kind of just made our own little club. We call it like basketball and cultural exchange club. So we would all just kind of like play basketball at the end of the day. And then when the Chinese students would come out, we would invite them to play or kind of join in with them. They would always play basketball, but we kind of just in the spring decided we wanted to do it. And it was kind of like 2 hours after school, we would just play like basketball. Yeah. So that was mainly it for me.
I muted myself. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so when you got back to Belmont Hill, were you able to, are you back on the tennis team now?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that. So yeah, when I got to Beijing, I found out that there were places to play tennis. However, I think that when you go to SYA China, specifically for me, I just kind of thought exploring the city, there was too much to explore and too much to do, too many things to involve yourself in, that tennis could wait. But however, when I got back, I was like voted captain of the tennis team at my school, and I just kind of like jumped back into it at the last. I like made it to their last match of the season, and then that's when they vote, and they're just kind of like, Owen, like, hey, like, why don't you take this spot? But so yeah, now I'm right back into things, and I'm kind of playing more basketball in America. I don't even play basketball in America, but I'm playing more than ever. So yeah, it was definitely great.
That's awesome. And just a little background. So there is an activities coordinator on site who works with our students to help find opportunities to engage with the local community. So often our students bring new activities to Beijing, like ultimate frisbee, and involve their classmates and the local peers. And the opportunities really are endless. However, if there is a specific sport or activity that you practice in the States and you're committed to wanting to practice in Beijing, it's typically possible. You know, there is some flexibility that we ask for. American football doesn't really exist elsewhere, nor does lacrosse. But really, you know, the opportunities are endless, and we do, I think, a good job of providing resources to find those activities that you want to participate in.
And we actually did find lacrosse.
No way, really?
I forgot to mention that. One of our friends was super into lacrosse, and he had found a group of mainly American post-grad students or out of college students that kind of came up with their own lacrosse program. And so I joined that because lacrosse is very popular in New England, and so I already kind of knew how to play it. And then we also even met some SYA China alums that were in the group of friends that played lacrosse every Sunday that we had no idea were even there. They were so excited to hear that we were from SYA.
Wow, so, that's so awesome. So yeah. Cool. And that just, once you go to China, you're hooked, I think, for the SYA. So that's awesome. And do you guys want to talk about some of your favorite educational travel or independent travel that you participated while at SYA?
I think my favorite trip that we took was actually the first one. We went to Shanxi province. That trip I really remember because I think it was the first time that I had been anywhere in China besides. We traveled together as a group. I mean, it was amazing. We parts of like a school trip, but also the best parts of like being in a new country. So I think that's really when I got really close to the friends I made was in Shanxi. My favorite memory from that trip is we had this scavenger hunt, and we started on the city wall in this, I think in the city called Datong. I think it was in Datong. And there were like 6 or 7 things that we had to find in the city. So one of them was this mural of dragons, and one of them was this really tall like pagoda building. And they gave us like a budget for that trip, and we just sort of spent the entire night out in the city guided by the scavenger hunt that we took. It was so much fun. But then we ended the night like at an arts and crafts shop where we got some arts and crafts to bring back to the hotel room, and we used colored pencils and like painted, and so it's really like it's an amazing combination of like having these really incredible ancient historic sites and also being able to travel with like your best friends. Really fun.
It brings back a lot of memories. Tariq, what about you?
The trip that I probably remember the most is the trip down to Yunnan. So the thing I'll probably remember the most is there are parts of the trip that I'll remember, but particularly one of the is the 36-hour train ride down to Yunnan. I think that was a trip in itself, and coming from New York City, the longest train I had ever taken was a 2-hour train, to get to school, which is upstate. So 36 hours was something I had never, thought of. I think that would be like going from New York City to Florida on like an Amtrak train. If that's the case, then I usually just fly. But I think, taking that 36-hour train ride, and then, we sort of had a car to ourselves as a school, but there were a few Chinese people. But what I remember the most is the Chinese people, like, that were in the car would sort of stick their head out their bunk and sort of look down the hallway and sort of like look and wonder at us, and sort of why are so many foreigners on the train. And then sort of similar to the wedding that I went to, once they found out that we could speak Chinese, they, more and more people began to talk to us, and it seemed to spread throughout the train. I guess people talk, and eventually it seemed like the whole train was in our car, and coming to see who we are, where we were from, and that sort of was an experience in itself. But for the trip, I will always remember the ethnic minority villages that we went to, and we actually stayed with some of the ethnic minorities. I remember playing this game. I forgot what the game was called exactly, but it's a game where they have 2 sticks and there are 2 people holding the 2 sticks, one on each side, and they have like a pattern, and you have to step in and out of the sticks, and it's sort of like a game that they played. And I remember, and sort of there's like rounds to it, and each round gets the sticks move faster and faster. I remember that, and that was so fun. I remember everyone pretty much got into it. I remember that some of the Chinese teachers got into it, and sort of taught us how to do it. And then in competition, I believe, and we put on like skits. Those were amazing, and that'll probably be the thing I remember the most is actually sleeping these ethnic minorities like houses, and really talking to them, and they put on performances, and that was really, really interesting, and I'll always remember that.
That sounds really fun, especially a 36-hour train ride. Owen, what about you?
Yeah, so I guess I'll just pick the last trip we did as a grade. So we went, besides the Shanxi trip and the Yunnan trip, our last one in, I think, April was to Gansu, which is kind of on or just off the Tibetan plateau. That was just incredible to me. I mean, we toured around with this. We had this one Tibetan monk who just kind of became our tour guide, and we went around a whole monastery that we were staying at, and it was huge, and we got to kind of just witness the lives that these people, I guess, choose to have. It was really interesting, and most of them didn't speak Mandarin. They were all other minorities, and they spoke different languages, but it was really cool to see that. And then some did speak Chinese as well. And kind of what Tariq was talking about on the trip to Yunnan, when we would go to some of these villages or places that had minorities, they would kind of give us a performance or kind of sing a song from their language or whatever, and then we would reciprocate by, like, someone would do like a dance performance, or like our whole class would just like sing like a super popular American song. And it was just like each time we went to one of these villages, whether it be in Yunnan or Gansu, it was just kind of like back and forth. And then on the Gansu one, we even we had a soccer game against the Tibetan monks, and they were all still wearing their robes, and we like played tug of war with them. It was like it was great. And then I also did independent travel, which is where you and your friends can have a small group of kids and you plan your own train or plane tickets, and you get an approved destination. And so I went with my friends to Shanghai and Hangzhou, which are kind of right next to each other. And it was a long weekend, so we got to stay for a couple of nights and then just make our way back up to school for classes later that week. And that was really fun. It was interesting having to do it all yourself, and definitely very good practice for the future. We kind of got our own hostels and we explored on our own. We didn't really have an itinerary, but I think we became kind of inspired by like being at SYA and like exploring all the time, that we weren't just kind of wasting our time on our phones or like watching Netflix, like, but in Shanghai, it was just like we were seeing Shanghai and Hangzhou and some really cool places. So that was pretty memorable for me.
And just to kind of talk about independent travel really quickly. So independent travel is an earned privilege by our students. So like Owen said, you have to kind of, it has to be approved by both our resident director and by parents back at home. So it's an approved destination with, a hostel or hotel. And it's also earned towards the end of the first semester, towards the start of the second semester. So we know that you have the basics down for the language, and that, you feel confident in both the culture and the language. But that's something that if you have specific questions about, please feel free to contact me. So Carly, I'm going to shoot it over to you from questions from our digital audience.
Yes. Yeah. First of all, thanks everybody for saying hi in the chat box. It was awesome. So we have a couple of questions regarding just like stuff to pack. You're going over abroad for 9 months. Do you have any like key items or suggestions on what to pack while they're going abroad?
I'll start just by saying that, so with the enrollment process, we're going to send out a welcome packet that has a packing list. And this year, I actually had it edited by current students. So I think we do an okay job of preparing you. But I guess my question for you guys, is there anything that you didn't pack that you wish you had?
I think I packed too much, actually. Yeah. I went through my packing list 8 times, and I was so short. I really didn't. I brought way too many pairs of shoes, and you wear a school uniform like 5 days a week. Like, you don't need that many clothes. Plus, everything there you really want to buy, like everything. So I would say, like, my advice would be don't pack as much as you think you need, because it's probably not as much as you actually need.
That's very good advice, and I know it's hard, but yeah, pack light.
Yeah. Okay, so Sophia from Green Hill School wants to know what it's like going into the program with very little background in Chinese. As you guys know, we don't have a language requirement for our China program. I know a couple of you said that you had, but if you just want to touch again a little bit on, getting to China and not knowing fluent Chinese, how that affected you.
Yeah, I mean, we all kind of took some Chinese before going, however, I was just talking to a girl from our class who was a senior at SYA, and she is actually going to the same college that I'm going to next year. So I was talking to her about not having taken any Chinese before SYA and then being in college now. And I think they all thought it was a little difficult. I think each of them mainly had host families with siblings that could help them, or had host parents that spoke a little English. But I remember this girl specifically, like her host grandmother would kind of give her little prizes each time she would learn some new Chinese, and she would give her like a piece of chocolate. And now she's actually pretty far ahead in college, which is really cool to me. And so I think she thought it was pretty easy, and I think that I think despite not knowing any Chinese, we all start in a similar spot where there is a divide between us and everyone else in China. However, SYA just does a great job of kind of closing that gap, and like we all eventually can speak, and we can all take the AP at the end of the year, and we all do quite well, which is great.
Thank you. So Anna, I don't know if this one might be good for you. We just had some questions regarding classes at SYA, you know, being on the same academic level as their classes in the United States, and midterms and finals and stuff like that. You wanted to touch on that a little bit.
So the idea is that, you know, at SYA, you aren't going to fall behind. So yes, the classes are going to be different. There's no doubt. Everything is related to Chinese culture and language, because that's what the program is about. And so while the classes will be different, we do follow an American style curriculum. So you're going to go back to your homeschool, like we said, without having really missed a beat, and the credits are transferable. And we do have, you know, finals or midterms in December, and then again in the spring. So in terms of the curriculum, it's not that much different if we're talking testing than your U.S. schools, and that's because we're modeled off of U.S. independent schools. But yeah, I think that that is always a concern for students, because it's like you are leaving something that's very known and trying something different. But it is in terms of the curriculum on par with what you're used to.
So we're just about up on time-wise. So everybody, we got to most questions in the chat box, but if we didn't, we will get back to you. Or if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the admissions team. Just a couple of things before we leave. Feel free to follow us on Instagram. I'm constantly posting pictures from current students abroad, so it might be fun to look at. Also, if you post a picture sharing your exciting news, please feel free to tag us or use your official class hashtag SYA 2018, and I would love to repost it. And again, you can always find us on Twitter and Facebook, and feel free to ask me any questions on social media. I'm always there to answer. And we have a really great blog section on our website, sya.org/student blogs, and we have students constantly blogging, taking photos, and we're constantly posting them on our website, which is also a really fun leadership opportunity. You'll get some stuff in your email about that over the summer. But our campus reporters do a really great job abroad, so feel free to go there and check some stuff out as well. And again, we'll get to your questions that you put in the chat box. Low on time, so.
Yeah, so yeah, if anything was left unanswered, please follow up with me. You should all have my contact info, but if not, I can put my details in the chat box, and just always feel free to reach out. And thank you, Sophia, Tariq, Owen, you guys were wonderful. I wish I could go back in time and do SYA again. And congratulations to you guys, the China class of 2018. You are in for an adventure and a life-changing experience, and we're so excited for you. So congratulations, and if you're in New England, stay warm.
And thank you guys. Thanks to the alums so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.